Hello, I'm Ray, and this apparently is still Weber Family Reviews. And my wife did a video on her own of comparing the different Ticket to Rides. And she's finally convinced me that this is at least a little bit fun. But I looked through all of the videos we've done, and one of the things I've noticed is all of them tend to be lighter games. And I know that this being a family channel is kind of the point. But we do have some heavy games, and I want to talk about some of the heavy games that I enjoy, even though I don't play them very often anymore. A lot of it's the time. So let me give a definition of what I think about when it comes to heavy games. It's not always complicated mechanics. Heavy games can include things that tend to take a long time to set up, a long time to play, and a long time to clean up. That doesn't necessarily match what other people's definition of heavy is. So some of these games, and go ahead and put in the comments whether you believe that the games are heavy or not. And I want to put two things as a more of a just open discussion point here. There are two games that one I just got and one I haven't played in years but finally found again. So the first one that I haven't played is Eclipse. Yes, I got a hold of it. Facebook Marketplace is great, and there's some really good people up here in Alaska that are willing to trade, or they're trying to get rid of games to switch out when they've played their through. And I finally got a copy of Eclipse. Now several of you that I know just went, but I have Eclipse. I know, I just haven't had a chance to play it. Well, I have a copy now, and I'll definitely be giving this a shot, but I haven't played it yet. And then another one is one that I played a long time with a good friend in Ohio, and he got me hooked on it. It's called Hansa Teutonica. Now they just came out with a box, which is funny because I just got a copy of the 2010 Z-Man games. Just came out with a big box version of it. But this one also is one that I haven't played in a long time, so I'm not going to put it on here because I can't really describe it. I should point out though that all of these games I find have very little luck. When I talk heavier games, I generally go towards Euros, and that means there's little luck. You don't have a whole lot of dice rolling, or the dice are an aspect of the game, but not really rolling the dice is. So we'll start with good old favorite of mine. Thank you, Paul and Tango, for bringing this to my attention. Is Power Grid. Power Grid has been called a spreadsheet game because you're trying to keep things all situated and organized as you try and power a great number of cities to get more money to be able to power more cities. You're building routes. You have to figure out the economics and the costs to be able to pay for and get all of the fuel to power the cities. At the same time, you have to buy routes to expand. I love it. The issue is it doesn't get a lot of play because it's not incredibly good two-player. I will point out, however, the robots, basically unique AI system for a two-player. If you're going to play Power Grid two-player, you have to get that expansion. You got to. So there's that. That one I don't think anyone's arguing about on the heavier side, at least medium to heavy. This one I believe is medium to heavy also, though you could say it's more solidly in the medium. Suburbia. This is the only game my wife and I have that's deluxeified. And we love the game. And it's an economic game again, where you're trying to balance income versus population growth. And it's SimCity in a box. What you're actually doing, though, is trying to build up your city as effectively as possible. But as you gain population, which is the points, you're going to cross barriers, which will reduce both your income and the amount of additional population you're getting per turn. So you got to balance that, plus the money, which you want to build your city with different tiles. That money has to go towards that as well. So it's a solid economic game that there's a lot of balance to it. And I really enjoy it. So I don't think there'll be too much argument. This one, most people haven't played, so there won't be an argument for it. Islebound. Islebound's working in multiple ways, and what you're attempting to do is get certain buildings or a certain amount of buildings to trigger endgame for victory points. The thing is, you get money and resources throughout the game by going to different islands. When you go to a different island, there's normally a cost associated with getting into it. You pay that into a pot. At some point, an action for somebody can be get that entire pot. But there's more to it than that. You can attack and take over a town, thereby meaning you don't have to pay for it, and you get paid instead of it going to the pot. You can use influence to gain those towns. And you spend a lot of time moving around on your ship, getting crew, solving problems to get influence in order to control areas. And I love it. It is one of the longer Red Raven games. The artwork is amazing. There's a lot to it. This is definitely a solid midweight. It is not that heavy, but it is definitely a midweight game that people need to check out. Okay, you've heard me talk about it before, and I will talk about it again. Also because I found this Facebook Marketplace in Michigan this time. And what I ended up doing was finding Heaven and Ale, and I had heard about it. And I heard that this might as well be themeless. Yeah, I can see the theme in it, but it is themeless. And what you're trying to do is basically put tiles around cities in a darker area or a lighter area. The lighter area will move your resources up. Those resources are used for your end game scoring. So you want them as far ahead as you can, because your lowest resource is going to end up being how you score victory points at the end. You also have to move up your brewmaster to do so as well. How you do that is by having tiles activated on the light side. But you need money to be able to do things. So how do you do that? Well, you put tiles in the dark side. When they activate, they give you money instead of resources. Plus, there's a couple of other aspects. I actually would give this one a more towards the upper midweight game. There's a lot to think about, and you have to balance it. Money's not incredibly tight, but it's not free form. You will be short on money and have to decide how you're going to go about doing things. Now this one, we have debated about getting rid of, my wife and I, for a great number of times, Fresco. And we don't want to. I've asked her, and I don't actually want to. Hopefully she's not watching this video, because then she'll know I don't really want to get rid of it. The problem is, its AI is really bad for two-player. It takes a lot more effort to play two-player, and we just don't get it to the table. But what you're trying to do is paint the, and I'm drawing a blank, so you're painting the ceiling of the cathedral, and it's Michelangelo's work, and I'm drawing a blank. And that means all the historians have now gone nuts, and my wife is, I'm sure, is losing it. But you're trying to get paints, mixed paints, to be able to get the right colors to get tiles. You also have, if I remember correctly, it's a token, but it's moving around, and I think it's the cardinal, and you're trying to build around them to get extra points. You're moving stuff around, you've got worker placement, you've got time choices. When you get up determines how much money you got, but also how angry your guys are. You get them up at 4 in the morning, they're not very thrilled with you. And you've got a number of actions that go on in between, from painting to getting paints to sending your crew to performance. It's a great one. This was one of our good finds also at Barnes & Noble. It was pretty cheap when we found it. All right, St. Petersburg. Now, I'm going to be honest, we haven't played this in a while since we discovered this in the second edition. There are 2 cards that if one person gets, it is broken. And it's Taxman, and the other one, again, drawn a blank, because we now haven't played it for about a year. So we need to get it back to the table. What ended up happening was a weird combination where all the money went to Jenny, and we played it out. I was not going to let her stop because I want to see how far that could go, and she just bought everything. But normally that doesn't happen. So if you got the second edition, never let people get Taxman and the blue card that gives you income in that phase also. But as a game, it's definitely a mid-weight, strong game that you're building a tableau, you're working on different aspects of your city, and you're trying to build change in an engine building game, essentially. At the same time, as you buy things, they make other things cheaper. So you've got to balance that out while keeping your money and resources up. And at the end of the game, you need to have other different senators and noblemen. What's cool about the second edition, though, is they've included the expansions, which also gives you a market and market phase. I recommend if you've got it, you play it with the market. It's great, and it adds a whole nother dimension, brings it up to a midweight. All right, William, I know you're thrilled about this. Puerto Rico. We haven't played this one in a long time. Again, it plays better with more players. But and there's some people that get really aggravated if you play it wrong. I don't think you can play it wrong. But it is a heavier game where you're taking actions and roles, and then everybody follows. But because you took that action, you yourself actually have a advantage. San Juan's a card game version of this. This is an in-depth one. Also a classic. This probably will never leave our collection, even though we don't play it very often, because at the end of the day, it's one of the best games ever made. Now, several people have just choked, but I like it, and this was one of the games that got me into the hobby games. I did war games, I did miniature games, I did role-playing. Puerto Rico and Power Grid got me into Eurogaming, and that was huge. All right, Stefan Feld and I generally have a love-hate relationship, but Castles of Burgundy is just a fun game that everybody gets into. I haven't met a person that's into games dislike Castles of Burgundy. I've seen a lot of people get bored with it, but it's just a lot of fun. This is one of the few ones out of all this group that there's dice and there's randomness to it. Not a lot, but it does have an impact on the game as to what actions you can take. But I still think this is great, and this will be in our collection a while, pretty much forever. Several people have asked me, have I played Tuscany yet? I'm probably not going to be honest. I'm not going to go out of my way to do it. If somebody has it, I will play it, but I'm not going to go hunting for it because I like Castles of Burgundy. Worker placement. There were a lot. Like, I really love Skullville. I think Skullville is actually my favorite worker placement. My wife loves viticulture. I think that's a strong one. But I think out of all of them, the Manhattan Project is the heaviest of them. There's a lot going on. You actually get tableau building. You get, bomb building. You get aircraft. You can attack your opponent, but you don't have to attack your opponent. You have to be able to test bombs, which means you're going to need other aspects. You have different types of workers, scientists, engineers, laborers. You can get generics. There's a lot to it, and it's a blast. That was no pun intended, but I'm running with it. But Manhattan Project is probably one of the heavier, maybe even the heaviest worker placements we have in this house. But it's a good one. Now the one that everybody goes, you shouldn't call it. And yes, this has a big box because I've got the expansions. Role Player. Role Player happens to be a character building game. if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, you're building a character. The goal is to build the most optimized character you can. That doesn't mean every stat is the highest. It means they all fall into a certain range based, on your class. And that really makes you go, why is this on the heavier list? This is midweight, because there's a lot of aspects to it. Dice manipulation is huge. Your dice drafting. You have money, so you buy equipment that can get you points at the end or can adjust other things. There's a lot going on here, and it can take a while. I recommend, the base game is good. I wouldn't necessarily put it on this list, but you need to do the Minions, Monsters and Minions. That's the one I believe it is. We've got the second one, which is Familiars and something else. But role player with Monsters and Minions gives you other options as well. You can go out and try and figure out how to beat the big bad. If you figure out how to beat the big bad, you may want to have different dice in there, and you're drafting dice, but you have to adjust the dice, so you may be changing the color of the dice. It becomes a very unique experience building a character, and yet it's heavier. It's definitely a heavier game than you would expect, and I enjoy it a lot. So these aren't all of the heavy games we have. These are just some of the ones that I figured I should talk about real quick and give people a heads up that the medium weight games seems to be where we tend to like it, but it's a good set. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you later. Bye.